All right, so we are continuing in the book of Esther. We're at week 7, which is called Exposure, in the Flourish Study Guide by Linda Brownback. Last week we watched how God began to turn the tables in dramatic fashion. The king had a sleepless night, and the record of Mordecai's loyalty was read, and the king found out that Mordecai hadn't been honored, and I guess that was a pretty important thing, to keep people's allegiance. If they did a good turn, you wanted to make sure they were rewarded for that. And so, just so happened, supposedly, God was working things so that Haman came in to ask to actually kill Mordecai, have him executed, hung on a gallows, and he was the official, so the king asked him, it's like, what should be done to the man who has pleased the king and done something good? And Haman rattled off all this great stuff you ought to do. You ought to be able to wear the king's old robe that he wore and a crown and sit on the king's horse that he's rode and be led through town by one of his officials and telling everybody how great he is. And then the king says, that's a good idea. Go and do that for Mordecai the Jew. And Haman was, of course, very upset about that. He had to go do that, and then he had to hang his head in shame, covered his head, and went back to his house mourning. And then his wife and his friends, they're like, well, I tell you, buddy, it's not looking good for you. Apparently, if Mordecai's a Jew, apparently you're not going to be able to, prevail against them. You're going to end up falling. And while he was reeling from that, then the king's eunuch came and arrived and said, hey, it's time for that big meal you're going to go to. So he had to be hurried off to go to that. So last chapter you saw a lot of Haman hurrying. He hurried in like first thing in the morning to tell the king about his hot idea about executing Mordecai, and then he had to hurry and get all the thing ready that he had proposed to honor Mordecai unknowingly, and then he hurried home, and then he had to be hurried to the banquet.
Had to get built the gallows.
Yeah, that was done the night before. Yeah, he was all pleased with that. So tonight, the truth finally comes out. Esther makes her bold request. Haman's evil is fully exposed. And the gallows he built for Mordecai become the instrument of his own death. So, chapter 7 is the climax of the conflict between Haman and God's people. Everything's been building since chapter 3 comes to a head at this second banquet. And as we started off this study, it mentioned about how the banquets are always like important things in the story. And this is another one, a big one here, the fact that at this banquet's when things turn around. And we also mentioned that the way that the story is structured, everything starts like on one side and it carries out, and then it's like a mirror image. It goes back the other way. And the turning point of that was last week, the king's dream, because he couldn't sleep. Then where Mordecai before was going to be executed, after the king woke up, and he didn't wake up, but after he couldn't sleep, and he decided in the morning to honor Mordecai, then all of a sudden now Mordecai is lifted up and praised. And we got a feast last time that Haman was all excited and happy because he got to attend to, but now he's being taken to a feast he's going to wish he hadn't gone to at all. So again, it's like we're on the upward swing where everything's going to start working out the way God has positioned everything to work out. And the time is right. When the time is right, God exposes evil and causes the wicked to fall into the very trap they prepared for others. We've seen that often in the Psalms. That was one of the refrains we saw there a lot. We will look at Esther's carefully worded petition for her life and the lives of her people, the king's reaction, and Esther's clear identification of Haman, Haman's desperate pleading, the king's wrath, and Haman's execution on his own gallows. So kind of telling you what's going to happen here, if you hadn't read it before. So let's start with Esther's petition at the second banquet. The first 4 verses, 1 through 4, please.
So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And on the second day at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had it been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy would never compensate for the king's loss."
Thank you very much. And it's interesting there. You see, the king basically gives her two different openings. He says, what is your wish? What is your petition? Is his first thing. And then, what is your request? And so he gives her basically kind of two blank checks. And the second one he says, even to half my kingdom. And we mentioned the first time he offered that's maybe more of a colloquialism, and he wasn't really going to give her half the kingdom, but it's just a way of saying basically, whatever you really want, I'll let you have it, type of deal. And again, we've seen that she hasn't identified herself, and even in this hasn't identified herself as a Jew as of yet. She frames the request personally: let my life be given to me as my petition or my wish, and then my people then as her request. And then she says, why? Because I'm sure the king probably had a crazy look on his face, like, what are you talking about? And she says what had happened, even though the king maybe didn't realize, and Haman didn't realize that she was one of those ones in that. But she really doesn't, she doesn't blame the king, even though ultimately, of course, it was his seal on the whole thing, and he approved it all. But she doesn't say, you did this, just that her people had been sold, and but for destruction, to be killed, to be annihilated. And if they had just been sold as slaves, then she would have been silent. But because the plan was total annihilation, she had to speak up. And so again, she waited until just the right moment and spoke with both courage and wisdom. And truth spoken at the right time, in the right way, carries great power. So again, if she had asked this previously, we don't know how that would have turned out.
And if she had blamed the king, then he might not have liked that either.
Right, if he had done the wrong...
Don't blame me, I'm the king.
Yeah, if she had taken the wrong tact on it and said, you did this, then he might get his back up and say, well, it's too late now. But because of the way she did it, for one thing, it certainly piques the king's interest, as we'll see in the next little section here. But, this whole thing probably came as a complete kind of blindsided the king. It was like, what's she even talking about? And the fact that she put it first, that she was going to be killed in this, it's like, well, who's going to kill my queen? What's going on here? That's a personal thing. It's not just her now. It's, well, that's my queen. So it, becomes personal to him as well. And so again, the way she did it, the timing that she did it, and how she did it was all very important and all kind of guided by God. We don't know, why, and that's the question I keep asking. Why do you think Esther waited until the second banquet to make her request instead of speaking at the first one? It's like, well, because God kind of guided her in that, right? There's no reason not to. She knew she had time, but still.
She just wanted him to want Mordecai to stew.
Not Mordecai, Haman. But Haman thought that he
Haman.
was,
Yeah.
And think about it too. She had waited, and if the king hadn't had that dream in the middle of the night, or hadn't had that dream, if he hadn't had a sleepless night, and he found out about what Mordecai did, or he found out what Mordecai did, and that he hadn't been honored, then when Haman came and he said, yeah, there's this guy I want to kill, the king might have said, okay, well, whatever, you're second in command, do what you got to do. And Mordecai could have been dead by the time the banquet. Haman could have put him on the gallows and then went to the banquet ready to chow down again. But the way God worked everything, it was just the perfect timing and the perfect thing that she waited. And even because she waited, and then Haman was all, all joyful in chapter 5, going out of the banquet, and then he saw Mordecai, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's that guy again. And he got all upset, and it didn't matter. All the honors and all the success he'd had in life meant nothing to him as long as Mordecai was alive. And because of that, because of his hatred, then he built the gallows, and he went and saw the king. And because he went and saw the king, he had to actually be the one to go in and honor Mordecai. And then now we're going to see about those gallows too. But our fill-in-the-blank questions there. At the second banquet, the king again asked Esther what her petition was, offering up to half the what?
Kingdom.
The kingdom. Number 2, Esther finally made her request by asking that her what be given to her? Her life be given to her, and her people at her request. Number 3, Esther explained that she and her people had been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be what? Annihilated. Completely wiped out. All right, now let's look at section 2. The king asked who, and Esther exposes Haman. Yeah, she names names. So let's read Esther 7, 5, and 6.
So King Ahasuerus answered and said to the Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing?" And Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is the wicked Haman." So Haman was terrified before the king and queen.
Thank you. In my mind, I imagine that Haman is just sitting there like at the meal, just like eating something, just watching this whole thing going on. It's like, I wonder what's going on here. And all of a sudden, it's him.
He hears his name.
Yeah.
What? Haman?
Yeah. I mean, it was just the 3 of them at this meal. So, I don't know. To me, I see so much kind of crazy, almost slapstick type comedy in this. Yeah. Choking on whatever she had fixed. Trying to get a drink, clear his throat. But you see, the king is shocked, right? It's like, who did this? Who would dare to presume in his heart to do such a thing? So, and again, Esther's response wasn't, well, you, king, are the one who signed off on this whole thing, right? But instead, she points to the actual problem, which is, of course, Haman, a foe and enemy, the wicked Haman. And, of course, Haman is terrified before the king and the queen. And maybe he was putting it together at that point. It's like, oh, she must be
Everything
a
else
Jew.
went wrong.
Yeah. So he's probably hearing his wife's, Zeresha's words. It's like, well, Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people. You will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. So it says the king apparently did not realize or had forgotten that he himself had authorized the decree. And it said, and this is the notes, that Haman had deceived him. I don't think so. I think Esther, again, she still hadn't revealed the fact that she was Jewish. It was only by putting 2 and 2 together. It's like, oh, those people that I said you can kill, those are the Jews. I guess you must be Jewish. I think the king had signed off on it, and it was just, like he might decide who's going to, cater the next banquet. It's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, have your cousin do it. I don't care. And the same way, I think he kind of rubber stamped Haman's proposal to kill all the Jews, because it's like, well, they're troublesome people. They do all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, yeah, take care of it then. So I don't think that he was like tricked in any way. I think he just did it because he didn't really care. He was a little bit of an absentee king in a way. We saw earlier on when he deposed Vashti that he was big about like talking to his advisors, like, what do you guys think I ought to do? What do you guys think I ought to do? And the same way with Haman. Haman was his most trusted advisor, so if he said to do this, he's going to say, okay, well, that sounds good. And he didn't look into and see what was going to happen if he had done that. And it's kind of interesting, a thing that I hadn't really paid too much attention to, like a lot about of this book I hadn't paid much attention to. Well, a thing that I didn't notice, that I really noticed as we going through it, is the time frame jumps. I always thought it was pretty much like Vashti's deposed, next thing you know, Esther's queen, and then this happens, then that happens, then it all wraps up really quickly. But there was like 8 or so years in between the start of the story and where we're at now. But everything now starts happening like lickety split, and it is like rapid pace here. The third day starts on chapter 5 after their fast, and so 5 is one day, 6 here into 7 is all one day as well. So it's gone from like, oh, this happened 5 years ago, and this happened, it's all of a sudden it's like day after day after day is happening right now. And in fact, between 6 and 7 is like, again, some happen in the morning, and then it's time for the afternoon meal or the evening meal that Haman gets drugged to. But
it's like the king might, might even forgot that he even gave that, yeah, do what you want. He might even forgot he even told him that.
I mean, he wasn't, the king wasn't down on the street. He wasn't hearing people saying like what's going on?
8 years.
Yeah, well, this had been the plot to, or the order to kill the Jews happened, and this happened probably pretty quickly after that.
Oh, okay.
It was like after all these years, after Vashti, and then after Esther became queen. She was queen for a while before this happened.
Oh, okay.
And then they, whenever Haman decided to do this, they cast the lot, to decide it was going to be the 13th day of the last month when he was going to enact it. So there was like a time crunch here, but I think this stuff has happened like pretty quick. Once the decree went out, then Mordecai started fasting, and then Esther heard about it and sent her people out there to say, hey, cover up, what are you doing? And then found out about the whole plot, and then she decided, okay, let's fast for 3 days. I'll go talk to the king. If I die, I die. And then, so now it's like, okay, come to this feast tomorrow, and then come to this feast the next day. So everything's happening pretty quick. But another thing I didn't notice, though, was the fact that she says about, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king. And I don't know if that's talking about, and again, it's kind of weird because Haman had originally offered to pay a bunch of money into the treasury, but then the king ended up saying, don't worry about that, and maybe he thought, whatever they get from the people they were going to kill, it would pay for itself. But I don't know if that's what she means, or if she means some other sort of loss to the king. The people, I guess, being sold as slaves, maybe taking the Jews out would be a bad thing, is what she's saying there, or not. I gotta look into that, figure out what that is.
Sort of like that. He was saying that if we all died, it's going to be a loss to you.
Yeah.
But if we were made male slaves, then we'd still be working for you.
Well, no, it'd be selling them as slaves, I think,
but
is the idea.
Selling, but still he would be getting off of the price of it.
Well, but she's saying if we had been sold as slaves, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king.
Okay.
So it's like them being sold as slaves would be a loss to the king.
Right.
And I need to figure out what the thought is on that, why that is. If she just, I don't know if she is like talking about the kind of like they've been blessed because they've been good to the Jewish people.
Wasn't they serving the king, part of them then, as the Jews was?
Well, I mean, they were just part of the people of the kingdom, so they were, Mordecai. Yeah, Mordecai had like a spot, like a prominent spot in the king's gate.
Yeah.
So, they were integrated. I mean, it was what they did, like with the Assyrians and the Babylonians and now the Persians. Although the Persians, I don't know how much they did that, but they would just conquer places and they would take the people in,
right.
And they would take the best people, like Daniel and his friends, and say, you guys are going to be advisors of the king. Right. And we'll see, like Nehemiah he was like the king cupbearer, I believe, and he was also in Susa. So it's crazy. He might have been there the whole time, but.
Because if they killed all the Jews, all of them would be gone.
Yeah, they'd be gone, and it's the question about what she means there is my thing, but I got to figure that out. But anyhow, she instead of talking about the king and kind of telling him, it's like, you better pay attention to what you're doing, buddy. You're the king. Instead, she identifies Haman, the adversary and enemy, and of course it was his brainchild to do this, his desire to do this. So the Jews weren't in any danger from Ahasuerus, except for the fact that he was kind of reckless with who he trusted, but they were in danger because of Haman. And of course, this goes back to the fact that Haman was an Amalekite, and the Amalekites hated the Jews hated the Amalekites, and God had said that the Amalekites would be taken care of, and this is how they're going to get taken care of eventually here. So the wisdom of inviting Haman to both banquets is now clear. The impact on both the king and Haman is maximized. So there comes a moment when silence is no longer an option. Esther's exposure of Haman shows the power of truth spoken courageously at the right time. So, and this is a stupid question, how does Esther's direct statement, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman, change the entire atmosphere of the banquet? Oh, I don't know. There's 3 people in your room, and you just said they're going to kill me, and it's him.
I don't think he's hungry anymore.
Yeah, food was a distant thing. Hopefully she didn't spend too much time on the preparation of it. Maybe they already ate, I don't know. It kind of made it sound like... So after the feast, they already ate. They were drinking wine after the feast. So they'd ate, and the whole time, Esther's there just watching Haman wolfing down the meal. Thinking...
had a good meal before Haman.
Yeah, it's like, that's your last meal, buddy. Yeah. So,
but if he had an inkling this is going to happen, you wonder how much he probably was able to actually choke down.
I don't think he would. I mean, he probably would have been upset because of the whole Mordecai thing. The fact that he'd been humiliated, and the fact that his wife had said, well, he ain't going to work out for you, buddy. But, I don't know. At the same time, you weren't supposed to be, like, upset and sad in front of the king. So, he couldn't have been, like, hangdog, and it's like, Remember when you told me to drag Mordecai around town, talk about how great he is? Well, I'm sad about that. What's he going to say? He can't. He can't say anything about it. So at least he had to put on a brave face, if nothing else. And maybe it was, maybe he was thinking, well, what do those guys know? I got invited to the feast with the king and the queen. I am the number one guy in the town. But that soon changes here. Number 4 in our fill in the blank. When the king heard Esther's request, he asked, who is he and where is he? And who would dare what in his heart to do such a thing? Presume. Who would presume? Number 5, Esther answered the king by saying, the adversary and enemy is this what, Haman? Wicked. Wicked Haman.
A harsh name.
Number 6, after Esther identified him, Haman was what before the king and queen? Excuse me. Terrified. All right, he was scared, shaking in his boots. He was wearing boots. I don't know. He was shaking, that's for sure. Let's look at now section 3, Haman's doom and execution. Not to get too far ahead of the story here. Would someone like to read verses 7 through 10?
Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of the wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before the Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, will he also assault the queen while I am in this house? And the word left the king's mouth. They covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good of the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's wrath subsided.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, this always cracks me up, thinking he's trying to beg for his life, and the king comes in. It's like, look at this. He's trying to assault her right here in my house. And I guess that it put the king getting up and in a wrath, leaving, I guess really put Haman in a bad spot, where if he left, that it would look, like he was running away from the charge, which he would have been. But if he stayed, he was also in trouble because no one was supposed to be alone with the queen or one of the concubines if the king wasn't there. So he's
He
like,
fell on a bed.
well, the couch. It was like the
Yeah, it was a
they
couch.
kind of reclined probably on a thing to drink and stuff. It
That's
wasn't.
why they were still eating.
Well, I think it sounded like they got done eating and then they went to another room to have the drinks. Yeah, the
because I
wine
didn't think
room.
nobody was allowed in the harem or
Yeah,
where
it wasn't harem. It was just like a couch or a
Daybed.
day bed type thing. Somewhere they could sit on, but they would probably like
okay,
recline.
So it was presentable. It wasn't
Yeah, it wasn't like he was in the bedroom.
scandalous.
Yeah, well,
He just fell over because he had too much wine.
it was kind of scandalous him just being there. He should have left like with the king.
Okay, yeah.
But of course he didn't want to go where the king was because the king was pretty clearly wanted to kill him.
He
And
was a little bit fit to be tied.
yeah, so if he went with the king, that's not good. If he stayed where he was, that wasn't good. If he just left, that wasn't good.
He lost his balance because the king came back in the room and caught him talking to him.
Well, I think he was just begging, and it's like, oh, please.
Yeah, it sounds
And the king, of course, was already mad and sees him there, and it's like, oh, this is too much.
You don't know how much wine he had.
Yeah. And it says,
Mentioning that there was the feast of the wine.
yeah. Yeah, this was the,
More wine than food, maybe?
I don't know. But the king left, and he interprets the fact that Haman was there and had fallen across the same couch that she was on as like he was going to like try to assault her right there in his own home, in his presence. So,
Double whammy.
yeah, double whammy. That was like too much.
It sort of sounds like after he come out of there, though, that after they left his king's mouth, that it says that they covered the man's face. Somebody else must have been there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like this Harbona was there, this eunuch, one of the eunuchs.
right.
And it could have been this whole time that they were there, and it would be, you got your butlers and maids, they don't count
Yeah,
as company.
servants, yeah.
They're just servants there. So maybe they were there the whole time.
Right.
It's like her bodyguard, right?
Kind of, yeah. It was basically, he was, I think, one of the king's guys. Well, they all were the king's guys, but I think he wasn't the one that, like, had taken care of her and kind of groomed her and, she listened
Yeah,
to.
right.
This was a different guy.
Right.
But he was one of the eunuchs, and apparently he knew about the 50-cubit gallows, and the fact that Haman had built it specifically for Mordecai, and so this guy's here really helping out, saying, yeah, and he built it for Mordecai, who had saved the king's life. So how about that? It's like, could it get any worse?
So
No.
Mordecai may have really been rude to this eunuch at one time. So this eunuch's
Haman.
getting payback.
Haman.
Haman, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Haman.
He's getting payback.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't probably think too much about anybody lower than himself in stature, as far as trying to be nice to him or anything. But yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know, a faithful eunuch, I guess. He said, hey, this is the guy who, he wanted to kill the guy who saved your life. What do you think about that?
I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah.
You do with what you want.
It's like already, it's like all this stuff's heaped on top of him. And then it's like now just one little thing to put on top of that. And of course he wanted to kill him because he was a Jew anyhow, but he made the gallows specifically to kill him early. So anyhow, and so the king is like, oh, well, that's handy. I guess go and hang him on it. And again, a gallows, like I always thought of, is like this is like the Old West, where it was a bar of wood and there was a rope hanging down and all that. But it wasn't that. It was a big spike sticking up out of the ground that they would just like put him on and let him hang there. Yeah, they'd impale him.
Like you, I thought it was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're used to like the old.
So when they say hanging, they just mean hanging in a different direction.
When did
Yeah.
the head cutting series comes in? What is the neck? I mean, is that the same centuries, or is that
Yeah, people cut people's heads off. Yeah, at different times.
how the guillotines?
On the
Yeah.
guillotine,
Yeah, the guillotines was a big humanitarian aid because they were cutting so many people's heads off that the executioners were getting they'd get drunk beforehand, and so you could pay the executioners not to drink before they cut your head off, so they can get it in one swing, as opposed to like 3 or 4 times because he's too drunk.
Wait a minute,
You don't want that.
Let's try this
I
again.
just thought of the one, where they just push a lever and the guillotine.
Yeah, that's the guillotine. That was like much later on. That was like the
Okay.
French Revolution
Yeah, that's
type thing.
when that came in. Okay.
Yeah, that was thousands of years later.
So I guess I pictured it as a derrick, like a,
Yeah,
had all these boards across there.
that's what I always thought. And I got a pictogram type thing that had, and it had spikes, and it was like, well, that's not right. And I was looking into it, and it's like, oh, that's what they did. Yeah, they didn't hang people like that back then.
But they didn't hang them, so.
Yeah,
Just a mob.
like a shish kebab. Yeah. This is like Vlad the Impaler type stuff. Maybe this is where he got the idea from. But yeah, so they hung him up on this 50 cubit high gallows. This
So
basically,
that was like 75 feet.
yeah, I think so. I think that's what we said last time when he had it built. A cubit's about 18 inches. I think it's often like between the crook of the arm to the tip.
You could almost put
Finger.
several people on.
Yeah. Maybe put some fruit in between them, like you're saying, like a shish kebab. But yeah, it was a horrible way to be killed.
50 cubics high is what it says.
Yeah. And a cubic's about 18 inches, so you take that, so about 75 feet. So
Right.
be a
I
foot and a
thought I
half.
heard somewhere it
per
was
cubit.
75. So.
Yeah. But anyhow, that is what's going on, and probably the fact that it says.
That's awful high, because I looked it up. That's about like 75 to 80 feet high. That's some long poles there. That's all a tree was.
Yeah.
And then
How
you have
did
to
you
be
get the person up there?
Yeah.
Got to have steps even to put them up there.
I guess, yeah. Maybe they put him next to somebody's house or something like that, where they
That
could
could have been.
take up on the roof and put him on there.
The castle, maybe?
It's hard to say. I don't want to look too deep into what they did, but yeah, it was pretty rough. So that's what happened. Haman's pleading only made things worse. He fell into Esther's couch, and that sealed his fate in the king's eyes. The gallows that Haman built for Mordecai became the instrument of his own death. This is a classic example of the wicked falling into the pit they dug for others. Like I said, we saw that over and over again in the Psalms, where that'd be like the plea, like, they've dug a pit for me, like, let them fall into it, type of thing. And the king, the death of the substitute satisfied the king's wrath. It wasn't only a substitute, he was actually the guy. In this case, it was the guilty dying in the place of the innocent. I guess he died in the place of Mordecai, who he wanted to put on there. In the gospel, we see this in the reverse. The innocent, Jesus, dying in the place of the guilty. So we see that God's justice is often poetic. The very instrument of destruction that the enemy prepares for God's people becomes the means of the enemy's own downfall. And we'll see this again later on as the story unfolds, because we get to the end of this. Yeah, Haman's dead, but his proclamation is still out there, and because it was a proclamation of the Medes and the Persians, you can't change it. So they got that whole problem still to worry about, but that's for another week. But we'll see how that also becomes like almost twisted, and like, yeah, the Jews can defend themselves. So if you want to try to kill them, it's like, well, they're going to kill you first. So good luck with that. So how does Haman's death on his own gallows illustrate the biblical principle that the wicked often fall into the trap they set for others? I don't know. The fact that he fell into the trap that he'd set for another? That's a stupid question. So let's look at our fill in the blanks here. The king arose in his what?
Is that what you call a horse to bear your own petard?
Somewhat, yeah.
Wrath.
His own wrath, that's right. He rose in his wrath from the banquet and went to his palace garden. So the king, it sounds like in his mind, it's like it was specifically done to target the queen. It's almost how he was taking it. And then when he saw him come back in, that he that's the next question. When the king returned, he found Haman fallen across the what, where Esther was? The couch. He interpreted it as an assault on the queen. So yeah, he saw like the guy had purposed in his heart specifically to kill the queen, who he loved so much because she was so very beautiful. And now it looks like he's actually trying to carry it out, even in the king's house.
By now.
Yeah. He was hot. Number 9, one of the eunuchs pointed out that the 50 cubit what that Haman,
Gallows.
the gallows that Haman had made for Mordecai, The king ordered him to be hung on it. Haman to be hung on it, that is to say. So, the chapter here we see is full of powerful gospel parallels. Haman prepared a gallows for Mordecai, but it became the place of Haman's own death. In the same way, Satan thought the cross would be the defeat of Jesus, but it became the instrument of Satan's defeat. Here the guilty dies in the place of the innocent, but in the gospel, the innocent, Jesus, dies in the place of the guilty, which is us. Here we see the king's wrath is satisfied by the death of a substitute. It keeps saying that. I guess he was substituting for Mordecai. But he was satisfied by this death. Now God's righteous wrath against our sin was satisfied by the death of his son. And Esther's courage and the exposure of Haman points us to the greater deliverance, the one secured by Jesus on the cross. So, we have some stuff there. But, number 10, in the gospel parallel, the gallows Haman prepared for Mordecai became the place of Haman's own death. Just as the what that Satan meant for Jesus' defeat became the instrument of Satan's defeat?
Cross.
The cross. That's right. Esther chapter 7 shows us the power of truth spoken at the right time and in the right way, and certainly of God's justice. Haman's evil is fully exposed, and the gallows he built for Mordecai become the place of his own death. Next week, we'll see how the story continues as the decree against the Jews is still in force, and God provides a way for his people to defend themselves. So let's close in prayer, thanking God that he exposes evil, protects his people.
I was thinking Esther is, really smart lady, but the Holy Spirit might give her the words to say also.
Yeah.
The right way,
Yeah.
The tone.
Yeah. Yeah, you see she had, you can see like the wisdom that she had in like listening to the eunuchs that were taking care of her. And it's like, just listening only to what they said to bring into the king. She had wisdom in discerning in that, and she had wisdom clearly in listening to the Holy Spirit guide her into just the right thing to say, knowing, and the right way to say it, and the right timing to say it. Again, how do you, what if she had brought it up before they even served the first appetizer? Would it have been the same situation? Or the fact the king was a little bit in his cups, did that help out? The fact that, he was taken aback by the revelation, and then all mad, and then came in, and, just everything worked out precisely the way that God intended for it to work out, so that it would have the desired outcome that God wanted there. So, anything else? If not, let's close in prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you again for all your great nature, the way that you take care of us, your justice and your mercy, Father, and the fact that you don't deal with us as we deserve, but instead you sent Jesus to die for our sins, so that we could have his righteousness imputed to us, and that we can be part of your family, Father, and into the kingdom. Help us to be aware of that, and to know that it's only by your grace and your mercy that we are able to exist, and that we have what we have. But help us to be generous to others, and to be forgiving to others, just as you've been generous to us and forgiving to us. And Father, help us to see your hidden hand in the things in our life, and not to kid ourselves that there's just coincidences and just happy little accidents and that, but that you're always working, you're always guiding and directing, and help us to be thankful to you every day for the things that we know of, and even the things that we never will know until we get to the other side, Father, how you've helped us. Be with those on our prayer list. Please be with those two families that are, on all the families, I guess, that are involved with the young ones that died, and continue to be with Cassidy. Help her to get home and get healthy. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.